I want you to close your eyes for a second, right?
Yeah.
Just completely immerse yourself in this environment.
Okay.
It is 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
You are standing on an exposed, completely barren slope in the northern Ural Mountains.
Oh, that is just brutally cold.
Right. And the wind is totally deafening. I mean, it is roaring so loudly, you literally cannot hear yourself scream.
Yeah, that kind of environment is terrifying. It's whipping up this dry, granular snow so violently you can't even tell where the earth ends and the sky begins.
Exactly. It's pitch black. And beneath your boots, there's this thick, almost concrete-like crust of icy snow.
Which is hiding whatever dormant life is buried underneath it.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of an unforgiving alien wasteland.
It really is. And, it's the kind of cold that actively attacks the human body.
Right, it doesn't just make you shiver.
No, not at all. At 20 below zero, with hurricane-force winds, we are talking about an environment that scrambles your cognitive functions.
Wow.
Yeah, the air is so frigid that taking a deep breath actually physically burns your trachea.
That sounds agonizing.
It is. Your body just immediately begins shunting blood away from your extremities, just to keep your vital organs from failing.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to step right into the center of that freezing, blinding landscape.
It's a heavy one today.
It really is.
No.
We're going to retrace the steps of one of the most baffling, just haunting mysteries of the 20th century.
And we have some incredible sources to pull from for this.
We do. We're relying on a massive stack of materials, primarily this amazing book by Donnie Eicher from 2012 called Dead Mountain, The Untold True Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident.
Such a good book.
Right. And we are also cracking open the declassified criminal case files from the Soviet archives.
Which are just full of wild details.
Absolutely. Plus, we have the intimate personal diaries and photographs taken by the victims themselves.
Yeah, and Eicher's own boots-on-the-ground investigation where he actually traveled to Russia in the dead of winter.
Just to stand on that exact same slope.
Which really gives his account so much weight.
It does. So let's talk about the inciting incident at the core of these files, because it's something that has consumed forensic investigators, meteorologists, historians for over half a century.
Right. So in February of 1959, you have 9 brilliant, highly experienced young hikers who just vanish in the subarctic Russian wilderness.
Just gone.
Gone. And then, weeks later, searchers find their tent abandoned on this mountainside.
And it wasn't just abandoned, right?
No, it was partially collapsed, buried in snow, and slashed open.
Slashed open from the inside, which is a forensic detail that just completely stops you in your tracks.
It makes absolutely no sense at first glance.
Wait, let me just emphasize that for the listener, because they didn't unbutton the tent to escape something.
Right, they didn't use the door?
Exactly. They took a knife, cut open this heavy canvas from the inside, and physically squeezed out into a deadly blizzard.
Over the following weeks and months, the bodies of all 9 hikers were located, scattered roughly a mile down the mountain from that slashed tent.
A whole mile away. In that cold.
Yes. And they were in sub-zero temperatures, yet they were found half naked.
Which is just, it's so unsettling.
Some were in only their underwear. Most were missing their shoes entirely, wearing only socks, or they were just completely barefoot.
Barefoot in the snow.
Yeah. And while some clearly froze to death, others had these inexplicable, brutal internal injuries that completely defy logic.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are listening to this right now, you might be thinking, all right, I've got a classic true crime survival mystery on my hands.
Which it is, on the surface.
But as we go deeper into these sources, I want you to realize this is about so much more than just a gruesome crime scene.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a story about profound human connection, about the absolute limits of the human psyche when survival's on the line.
And about that innate, almost dangerous drive we all have to seek out the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. So the contrast between the psychological profile of these hikers and the environment where they died is really the key here.
It is. The mountain where they perished is known as Holachal. And in the indigenous Mansi language of the region, that translates directly to Dead Mountain.
I mean, that name alone is ominous.
Right. The Mansi historically avoided this specific peak entirely. They considered it desolate, lacking in game.
But today, the world knows that slope by a different name.
Yeah, Dyatlov Pass, named in memorial for the leader of this doomed expedition, a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov.
So I want to take us to the exact moment of the grisly discovery, because the details here are completely mind-bending to me.
They really are.
It is February 26, 1959. A search party is combing the area, and we have this young student named Boris Slopsov and his partner, Mikhail Sherevin.
And they are fighting through this horrific headwind, barely able to see anything.
Right, and they spot something dark flapping in the snow near the tree line.
So they approach it.
And they find the hiker's tent. Now, this isn't some flimsy summer camping gear, you know?
Oh, no. This is essentially a heavy canvas fortress.
Yeah, it's a Grade 3 winter shelter, meaning it is custom-stitched, designed to keep out hurricane-force Arctic winds.
And they find it partially collapsed.
Right, but what is truly fascinating here is the psychological dissonance of what the searchers find when they finally look inside that tent.
Yeah, because if you imagine a scenario where 9 survival experts are suddenly forced to slice open their shelter and flee for their lives into a blizzard.
You'd expect a total mess.
Exactly. You expect the interior to be a war zone. You expect to find gear thrown everywhere, sleeping bags torn, just a scene of absolute chaotic panic.
But they don't find that at all.
Not even close. Inside, there is this haunting, almost eerie tidiness.
It's so weird.
The searchers find the group's ski boots, 6 pairs of them lined up in this disciplined militaristic formation along the wall.
Just sitting there.
Yeah. The heavy metal stove, which they use for heat, is sitting in the center of the tent, completely unassembled.
And there's food, too.
Right. In the corner, there is an open flask of frozen cocoa just waiting to be reheated. There's a cloth napkin laid out with neat, perfectly cut slices of ham.
I mean, the interior of the tent looks entirely peaceful, right? Like they were just settling in for dinner.
It gives you absolute chills.
You just have this massive cognitive dissonance. On one hand, you have a peaceful, hyper-organized shelter.
Right.
And on the other hand, 9 expert mountaineers people who know beyond a shadow of a doubt that leaving the tent without boots is a guaranteed death sentence.
They knew it better than anyone.
Right. And yet they somehow fled into the pitch black in such a hurry that they left the ham, they left the cocoa, and they didn't even grab their shoes.
And that cognitive dissonance really only deepens when you examine the autopsy reports of the bodies found down the mountain.
Because they found them by the tree line, right?
Yeah, roughly a mile away. 6 of them died of hypothermia.
Let's actually pause there because I really want to understand the mechanics of this.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned they were found half naked.
They were.
If you were freezing to death, why on earth would you take your clothes off?
That is a great question, and it brings up a critical physiological phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing.
Paradoxical undressing. Okay.
Right. So when a human body reaches the final terminal stages of hypothermia, the brain's temperature regulation center, the hypothalamus, essentially malfunctions.
Okay, so your brain just breaks.
Exactly. For hours, your body has severely constricted your blood vessels, keeping all the warm blood trapped in your core to protect your vital organs.
Which makes sense, survival mode.
But as you approach death, the muscles controlling those vessels become exhausted, and they fail.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, all that warm blood rushes back into your freezing extremities, and the victim experiences a sensation of extreme burning heat.
So they feel hot.
Yes. In their delirium, they believe they are literally on fire, and they begin violently tearing off their clothes just before they die.
That is utterly terrifying.
We also see evidence of terminal burrowing, which is an evolutionary brainstem reflex, where freezing victims try to dig themselves into small enclosed spaces.
Like an animal hibernating.
Exactly.
Okay, so that explains the missing clothes, but it absolutely does not explain the other 3 hikers. The sources detail injuries that sound like a literal car crash.
Yeah, 3 of the hikers died from massive, brutal, blunt force trauma.
We were talking about severe skull fractures, right?
Severe skull fractures, and in 2 cases, completely crushed rib cages.
Which is insane.
And what really puzzled the forensic examiners in 1959 is that while the internal bones were shattered, the exterior skin showed almost no bruising or soft tissue damage.
Wait, hold on. I'm really struggling to understand that. How do you crush a human rib cage without bruising the skin?
It's incredibly difficult to explain.
Like if someone hits you with a baseball bat, or if you fall off a cliff onto a rock, you are going to have massive purple bruising on the surface.
Right, surface trauma.
So how does a human body sustain that kind of trauma on a flat, snowy slope?
That is the exact question that drove investigators crazy. A localized blow, like a weapon or a fist, causes surface bruising.
Yeah.
To shatter ribs without external bruising requires immense, evenly distributed pressure.
What?
Think of the blast wave from an explosive, or the crushing weight of thousands of pounds of snow instantly compressing the chest cavity.
So it requires a force far beyond human capability.
Exactly. And adding to the macabre nature of the scene, one of the female hikers, Luda, was found missing her tongue and her eyes.
Which immediately sounds like a serial killer, some sort of ritualistic murder.
It does sound like that, but we have to look at the mechanisms of nature here.
Right, right.
Her body was found face down in a small stream beneath several feet of snow months after she died.
Oh?
So flowing water and small scavengers will naturally target the softest exposed tissues first, the eyes and the tongue.
Okay, so it is a gruesome but entirely natural post-mortem process.
Yes, exactly. However, the forensic anomalies definitely didn't stop there.
Of course not.
When the teams tested the victim's clothing, they found abnormal levels of radioactive contamination on certain garments.
Okay, I have to stop you again. Why on earth were Soviet forensic teams in 1959 running Geiger counters over hikers' clothing?
It seems so random, right?
Were they just testing everyone for radiation back then?
They weren't, and this really highlights the desperation of the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov.
He was just stuck.
He was hitting a brick wall. He had absolutely no logical explanation for the shattered ribs, the slashed tent, and the bizarre state of the bodies.
So he just started trying everything.
Exactly. In a desperate search for answers, he sent pieces of the victim's clothing to a specialized radiological lab in Sverdlovsk.
And they actually found something.
They did. They detected beta radiation on a few specific garments, like a sweater and a pair of trousers.
So we have crushed ribs, paradoxical undressing, a slashed tent, and radiation.
It's a lot to take in.
Which leads to the official conclusion from Ivanov. He closed the Soviet case file by stating that the hikers died as a result of an, quote, unknown compelling force.
Unknown compelling force. In the context of Soviet legal bureaucracy, that is a euphemism that admits total defeat.
It's basically a shrug.
It essentially translates to, we have absolutely no idea what happened here, the evidence makes no sense, and we are permanently closing the books.
Naturally, when official government channels throw up their hands and seal the files, human imagination rushes in to fill the void.
Oh, immediately. The theories that sprang up around this incident are wild.
Yeah, you've got your standard natural theories, right? A massive avalanche or a freak localized windstorm called a microburst.
Right. And then you get into the true crime territory. Escaped prisoners from the nearby gulags murdered them for their supplies.
Or that the local Mansi tribes attacked them for trespassing on a sacred mountain.
Which was completely unfounded, but people speculated. And then the theories quickly spin into the paranormal and the conspiratorial.
Of course they do.
People speculated about UFO sightings, alien abductions, a vicious bear attack.
Or that the group drank blinding moonshine that made them hallucinate and run into the night.
Right. But given the intense Cold War context of 1959, the most persistent theory was that they stumbled upon a top-secret Soviet military weapons test.
Oh, right, like an errant missile or a parachute mine.
Exactly. And that they were either killed by the blast or subsequently murdered by a military cleanup crew to cover it up.
You really have to wonder, why do we do that?
What do you mean?
Like, if you're listening, think about your own reaction to a mystery. Why does society immediately rush to UFOs, military cover-ups, and even hostile Arctic dwarves when we are confronted with a tragedy?
It's a really interesting psychological question. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is fundamentally about our need for control.
Okay, I can see it.
A traumatic, inexplicable event, especially one where 9 highly competent, healthy young people die for seemingly no reason, is deeply terrifying.
Yeah, it reminds us of our own fragility.
And the chaotic nature of the world. By assigning the blame to something grand, deliberate, and powerful, like a sprawling government conspiracy or an alien intelligence, we are trying to put a framework around the chaos.
We'd rather believe in a vast, organized, secret plot than accept the terrifying reality that the universe is just random, indifferent, and incredibly dangerous.
Exactly. A conspiracy gives the tragedy a purpose, even a sinister one.
But before we get totally lost in the conspiracy theories, I want to pull us aggressively back to the source text.
Okay, let's do it.
Because there is a detail in Eicher's book that absolutely drove me crazy.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
It completely changes how we view this pristine mystery. Let's go back to the moment the searcher, Mikhail Sherevin, spots the tent.
Right.
He fights through the wind, approaches the canvas, sees it's collapsed, and what does he do? He takes his heavy metal ice axe and literally chops his own entrance into the canvas to look inside.
It is an absolute nightmare for any forensic investigator.
Right. Like, I am sitting in my living room reading this, practically yelling at the book.
I had the exact same reaction.
Doesn't this completely contaminate the entire crime scene right from minute one?
It absolutely does.
How much of this grand, unsolvable mystery, the slash tent, the confusing trajectory of the cuts, is simply the result of a totally botched amateur rescue effort?
It's a huge factor.
We have college students hacking away at the most important piece of evidence with an ice axe.
It's frustrating, but this raises an important question about the context of the era and the mindset of the people involved.
True.
You have to put yourself in Sheridan's boots. This wasn't a modern CSI team cordoning off a grid with yellow tape, taking photographs, and wearing sterile gloves.
Yeah, they weren't cops.
These were 20-something university students desperately searching for their missing friends. They had been trudging through deep snow for days.
So they were exhausted and panicked.
Exactly. When Sheridan saw that tent, his immediate thought wasn't, I need to preserve the blood spatter patterns. His thought was, my friends are freezing to death inside this canvas right now.
And trying to unlace the frozen toggles of a thick canvas tent in -20 degrees while wearing massive winter mittens is physically impossible.
It's literally impossible. He did what any desperate friend would do. He used the tool he had to breach the shelter as fast as possible.
That makes total sense when you put it that way.
They did not view it as a crime scene. They viewed it as an active rescue mission. The preservation of evidence was entirely secondary to saving lives.
But you are absolutely correct in your frustration. That initial panicked contamination permanently muddied the waters of the investigation.
It did. Investigators later had to spend weeks just trying to determine which slashes were made from the inside by the fleeing hikers and which were made from the outside by a student with an ice axe.
It completely alters how we have to look at the evidence. We are looking at a puzzle where the first person on the scene rearranged all the edge pieces.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But to really understand why these hikers were out there in the first place, miles from civilization in the dead of winter, we have to rewind.
We do. We need to go back in time to 1959.
We have to look at exactly who they were and the very unique historical window they were operating in.
Right. To the industrial city of Sverdlovsk, which we now know as Yekaterinburg.
And the historical backdrop here is incredibly crucial to the entire expedition.
It's everything, really. This was the era of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev's thaw.
Because Joseph Stalin had died a few years earlier, right? In 1953.
Yes, and his regime was marked by heavy, brutal suppression, mass purges, and absolute societal paranoia. Millions had been sent to labor camps.
So it was just a very dark time.
Very dark. But when Khrushchev took power, he initiated a process of de-Stalinization. He eased some of that cultural suppression.
So people could finally breathe a little.
Exactly. There was a sudden flowering of arts, sciences, literature, and most importantly, a renewed sense of boundless optimism, especially among the university youth.
And out of this post-Stalin optimism comes the concept of the Russian tourist.
Which is a very specific term in this context.
Right. I need to clarify for the listener, this does not mean someone in a Hawaiian shirt with a camera looking at historical monuments.
No, not at all.
In 1950s Soviet Russia, a tourist was a hardened, elite adventurer.
This was someone who pushed their physical and mental limits against the harshest nature on Earth.
And there was a specific reason they did this, right?
Yeah, because foreign travel behind the Iron Curtain was strictly forbidden for everyday Soviet citizens. The wilderness became a vital loophole for freedom.
I love that phrase, a loophole for freedom.
It really was. You couldn't go to Paris or New York, but the Ural Mountains and the deep Siberian forests were vast and unregulated.
So was their only escape.
They were the only places young Soviets could go to experience true, unmonitored liberty. There were no government minders, no KGB informants, no propaganda posters in the deep snow.
It was a space where they could map uncharted territories, sing forbidden songs, debate politics around a fire, and just exist without the watchful, heavy eye of the state.
And to understand how serious this was, the group we are following wasn't just going on a weekend camping trip.
No, they were undertaking an expedition to earn a grade 3 certification.
Right.
What does that actually entail in 1959?
Well, a grade 3 certification was the highest rank a hiker could achieve in the Soviet sports registry. It essentially required the equivalent of a master's degree in survival.
Wow.
A team had to cover at least 300 kilometers over 16 days, entirely on skis, navigating treacherous mountainous terrain in the dead of winter.
Without GPS, modern lightweight gear, or any means of emergency communication.
Exactly. They had to spend a minimum number of nights sleeping in a tent in sub-zero temperatures. It was a grueling test of endurance, navigation, and group cohesion.
So let's meet the team taking on this monumental challenge. In Dormitory 531 at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, you have this core group of friends.
A really amazing group of kids.
First, you have Igor Dyatlov. He is 23 years old, the undisputed leader.
He was a brilliant radio engineering student.
Yeah, he literally tracked the Sputnik satellite passing over the Earth from his dormitory roof using a telescope he built himself.
Igor was a technical prodigy. He designed and built shortwave radios in his bedroom.
Which was dangerous back then.
Oh, incredibly. Possessing or building shortwave radios was heavily restricted and often technically banned under Cold War rules because the Soviet government was terrified of citizens picking up Western broadcasts from the BBC or Voice of America.
But Igor did it anyway.
His technical brilliance gave him a sort of protective aura. He possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of physics and mechanics combined with a very calm, indisputable authority.
People simply felt safe when Igor was in charge.
They really did.
Then you have Zenaida, or Zina Kolmogorova. She's 22, also a radio engineering student. She's a beloved tomboy, incredibly charismatic.
And she serves as the group's unofficial diarist.
Yes, she writes this entry while they are packing their gear in the dorm that just perfectly captures the vibe.
I love that entry.
She says the room is in artistic disorder, which is just such a great, incredibly relatable way to describe the chaotic, joyful energy of college kids packing for a massive road trip.
It immediately humanizes them. They aren't just names on a tragic police report. They are kids excited about an adventure.
Exactly. Then you have Ludmila Dubinina. She is the youngest at 20.
She is a fervent communist, deeply idealistic, but incredibly tough.
Yeah, the sources share an astonishing story about her from a previous trip. She was accidentally shot in the leg by a hunter's stray rifle bullet while deep in the Siberian mountains.
And the group had to carry her out on an improvised stretcher for 50 miles.
But she never complained. She actually sang songs and kept the group's spirits up the entire time. She was practically made of iron.
She was amazing. You also have Yuri Yudin, the geology student who is ironically plagued by severe rheumatism and a heart condition.
And a few other brilliant guys. Georgie, who serves as the group's jester and carries a mandolin everywhere.
Kolovatov, a serious nuclear physics student who smokes a pipe.
And then there's the wild card of the group, Alexander Sasha Zolotaryov.
Sasha is a deeply fascinating addition to the roster. He is 37 years old, making him significantly older than the rest of the group, who are all in their early 20s.
Right.
He is an outsider, a hiking instructor, who asked to join Igor's expedition at the absolute last minute because his original group's schedule fell through and he needed the grade 3rd certification for a promotion.
And most importantly, he is a World War II combat veteran who survived some of the most brutal fighting on the Eastern Front.
And visibly, he stands out like a sore thumb.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
He's got a mouthful of shining gold teeth, and he is covered in military and prison-style tattoos.
He's got the name Gina tattooed on his hand, the year 1921, and a picture of beets on his forearm.
Right. If you're a clean-cut, idealistic engineering student at a prestigious institute in 1959, this guy must have looked like he dropped in from another planet.
But in the cultural context of the post-war Soviet Union, those tattoos and gold teeth are distinct markers of a hard, traumatic life and severe military service.
Yeah, gold teeth were standard dental replacements for soldiers who lost teeth to malnutrition or combat.
What is beautiful about the dynamic between Sasha and these students is the strict, egalitarian code of the hiking community.
Gender, age, and background didn't matter once you were on the trail.
Exactly. Gender equality in particular was deeply embedded. Zina and Lyuda were not there to be taken care of or to cook the meals.
They carried the same heavy packs, chopped the same firewood, and commanded the exact same respect as the men.
Which was quite a progressive contrast to gender roles in the West at that exact same time in the 1950s.
As I was reading through their profiles, the analogy that kept hitting me was that this group functions exactly like a modern-day tech startup team in Silicon Valley.
That's a great comparison.
You know, they are all in their early 20s. They are brilliant. They are incredibly close-knit, hyper-competent in their specific niches, and they are out there deliberately pushing the boundaries of what is possible with the limited technology and resources of their era.
They're optimizing everything. That is a highly accurate parallel.
Yeah.
They calculated exact caloric food ratios to maximize energy while minimizing weight. They custom designed their own stove to efficiently heat the tent without smoking them out.
And as we mentioned, their leader, Igor, had a proven history of handling extreme pressure.
In his journals from a previous trip, he describes a terrifying moment where the group was suddenly charged by a massive herd of wild horses.
And instead of panicking or running, Igor firmly commands everyone to freeze.
And the herd parts and splits around them like a river flowing around a rock. He understood how to maintain absolute order in the face of chaos.
Which just makes the slashed tent and the panicked, shoeless flight later on so incredibly hard to reconcile.
It just doesn't fit his character at all.
How does a guy who stares down a stampede of wild horses suddenly cut his way out of a tent and run into a blizzard?
It's the central paradox.
But that infectious optimism and that tight bond, it carries them right into the first leg of their journey. And looking at their outbound trip, we get a clear glimpse of their joyful dynamic in action, mere days before everything goes dark.
Right. So on January 23, they officially depart. It begins with a frantic rush to the train station in Sverdlovsk.
And like broke college students anywhere in the world, they hadn't bought enough tickets for everyone.
So they had Lyuda physically hiding under the wooden train seats to evade the conductor.
Classic. I just love that detail. And they meet up with another hiking group on the train, and they just start singing.
This is where we see Sasha, the older, tattooed veteran, completely integrate himself into the group.
He doesn't pull rank or act aloof at all.
He joins right in through music. He starts singing Georgie's playing the mandolin.
They sing a popular mountaineering song with the lyrics, "Our voices will carry on over mountain ridges and peaks, over February blizzards and storms."
It's a beautiful, soaring moment.
But knowing what happens to them in a February blizzard, it is totally haunting to read.
The contrast between the harsh physical environment of the Soviet Union and the warmth of the hikers is incredibly stark during this outbound journey.
They have a layover in the town of Sarov.
Yes. And Sarov is a harsh, gray, industrial mining town. It is 5:00 a.m., it is freezing cold, and they were locked out of the train station because the railway workers simply refused to let them in.
So Georgie decides to pull out his mandolin on the freezing platform to lighten the mood and starts busking.
And he nearly gets arrested by a local policeman for disturbing the peace.
The Soviet authorities were basically like, "We do not do fun here at 5 a.m. Put the mandolin away."
Pretty much, but the group completely brushes it off. They don't let it ruin their mood.
They wander into the town and end up knocking on the door of an elementary school, schooled #41.
They ask the staff for a warm place to rest for a few hours, and in exchange, they agree to act as guest speakers for a class of 7 to 9-year-olds.
And the cultural context here is that having guest speakers in Soviet schools was common, right?
Yes, but it was almost entirely serious war veterans or grim factory workers lecturing the children on civic duty and state production quotas.
Right. Very dry, serious stuff.
Suddenly, these kids have a classroom full of vibrant, laughing young mountaineers showing off specialized ice crackers and imported Chinese flashlights.
The hikers actually pitched their heavy canvas tent right there in the middle of the classroom to demonstrate how it works.
Sasha leads the kids in a Russian sing-along of Mary Had a Little Lamb.
The kids completely fall in love with Zina. They literally beg her to stay and be their pioneer leader.
And when the hikers finally have to leave to catch their next bus, the entire class pours out of the school and follows them down the snowy road to the station, waving goodbye.
It really highlights the warm, vibrant bubble this group created wherever they went.
They move through this incredibly heavy industrial Soviet landscape, past smoking factory stacks and forced labor gulags, projecting nothing but light, curiosity, and camaraderie.
And the heartbreaking epilogue to that school visit is that weeks later, when the news broke across the region that the group was missing, those young school children from Sarov sat down and wrote letters to the university asking where Zina and their new friends were.
Yuri Yudin, the survivor, later received those letters and was so overwhelmed by grief that he couldn't bear to answer them.
That is just awful. But here's where it gets really interesting, though, regarding the outbound journey. On the train ride to Yvdel, there is a bizarre incident recorded in Zina's diary. A drunk man on the train aggressively accuses the hikers of stealing his bottle of vodka.
Oh, right. This is a very important detail.
It causes a whole tense scene. Now, I point this out because it explicitly highlights a core rule of Igor's group.
Huh?
They took a solemn, unbreakable oath not to drink alcohol or smoke on this expedition.
They were strictly 100% sober.
So, for anyone pushing the persistent theory that they drank bad, blinding moonshine and went crazy on the mountain, the source material aggressively debunks that right off the bat.
Their discipline was absolute. They were athletes on a mission.
So, from the town of Yvdel, they crammed into a tiny bus to the final outpost village of Vizhai.
Imagine the logistics of this. 20 hikers, because they were sharing transport with another group, and all their bulky winter gear, skis, and heavy canvas tents, shoved into a 25-seat GAZ 651 bus.
They are literally sitting on each other's shoulders.
Packed in like sardines, singing folk songs the entire bumpy way into the deep wilderness.
That joy is just so palpable in the photographs they took on that bus. But the sheer joy of that outbound journey makes the impending silence that much heavier.
It does. They head into the wilderness, waving goodbye to the truck driver who dropped them at the trailhead.
And as the days tick by toward their expected return date, the silence slowly transforms into this creeping, agonizing dread back home in Sverdlovsk.
February 13th was the critical date. This was the day Igor was scheduled to arrive back at a telegraph office in Vizhai and send a message to the university sports club announcing their safe return to civilization.
But the date passes with no word.
Initially, in the university mountaineering community, delays are considered standard. Bad weather, a broken ski, a mildly sprained ankle. These things happen and can easily add a few days to a trek.
Sure. But by February 16th, Igor's sister, Rufina, goes to the university to ask for information. She's getting worried.
And the officials completely brush her off.
They tell her to go home, be patient, that the sports club director is out of town, and basically that she is an overreacting sister worrying over nothing.
This is where we see the intense systemic friction in Soviet bureaucracy.
It's so frustrating to read about.
If we use an analogy, the Soviet administrative system functioned like a severely clogged funnel. All information and requests had to travel up the chain to a single authority figure at the very top before a single drop of action could flow back down.
And no one wants to be the one to make the call.
Exactly. Furthermore, there is a deeply ingrained cultural ethos of stoicism and self-reliance in Russia. You do not raise an alarm or complain unless it is an absolute, undeniable crisis.
So no mid-level official wanted to take the risk of initiating a massive, highly expensive state search operation without explicit authorization from the top director, Lev Gordo, who happened to be away resting at his dacha.
So, paralyzed by bureaucracy, the university stalls.
I want you to really think about this for a second. Put yourself in the shoes of a parent in 1959.
It's a nightmare scenario.
You have no cell phones, no GPS tracking, no satellite communicators. You literally just hand your child over to the mountains and pray they come back.
Yeah.
How do you cope when the only authority that can mobilize helicopters to help you, the university, looks you in the eye and tells you to just go home and wait?
It must have been psychologically agonizing.
That's just absolute torture. By February 18, the telegraph inquiry to Vizhai officially confirms the group never returned to the outpost.
So the families are now in a full panic. The university finally yields to the pressure and begins to organize a search.
But they immediately hit a massive, unbelievable bureaucratic wall.
The University Hiking Commission has lost or perhaps never even filed Igor's mandatory route map.
They are flying blind. They have no idea where on this massive, sprawling Ural mountain range these 9 kids actually went.
They have hundreds of square miles of dense forest and treacherous peaks to cover, and no starting point.
To solve this, they bring in Yevgeny Maslenikov, a highly respected backcountry skier and university alum who had informally advised Igor on planning the route weeks earlier.
They reconstruct the probable path from his memory. They mobilize military airplanes, organize ground teams made up of volunteer student hikers, and crucially, they enlist the help of the local indigenous Mansi people, led by a tracker named Stepan Kurikov.
We have to talk about Yuri Yudin here, the 10th hiker.
Right, the geology student with the bad back.
His chronic pain flared up so severely during the first few days of the trek that he physically couldn't continue. He had to turn back and leave the group while the other 9 went on toward Dead Mountain.
He went to his home village of Ameliashevka to rest and recover, completely isolated and unaware of the massive panic building in Sverdlovsk.
When Yudin finally returns to the university campus weeks later, he walks right into a nightmare.
He discovers his friends are missing and presumed dead.
And even worse, he realizes that before he left the group, Igor had told him they might be a few days slower than planned.
And Yudin had forgotten to pass that updated timeline on to the sports club.
He carries this immense, crushing guilt. feeling that his failure to communicate caused the fatal delay in the rescue effort.
Imagine the psychology of that. Imagine the crushing survivor's guilt of realizing that a chronic illness, a painful condition that had hindered you your entire life, was the exact mechanism that saved your life.
Meanwhile, your closest friends, the strongest and healthiest athletes you know, perished in the snow.
It is a heavy, lifelong psychological burden that you didn't carry.
So out on the mountains, the search operations eventually locate the trail.
The military planes are flying dangerously low overhead, spotting ski tracks and dropping notes tied to brightly colored flags to guide the ground teams.
And it is the Mansi trackers who play an absolutely essential role here.
Historically, indigenous groups in these remote regions were often treated with severe suspicion by the Soviet state, and some initial wild theories from officials even blamed the Mansi for murdering the hikers.
Which is just classic scapegoating.
Totally. But without their profound generational knowledge of the terrain and their ability to read faint impressions in the windblown snow, the searchers might never have located the tracks leading up the Ospia River toward the pass.
Which brings us full circle back to February 26, when Boris Slapsov and Mikhail Sharavin follow those tracks, head up the steep slope of Dead Mountain, and find the slashed tent.
And the bodies. And the mysteries born.
Decades pass, the Soviet Union collapses, the families age, and many die with these agonizing unanswered questions.
Which brings us to the modern era.
To 2012, when an American filmmaker and author, Donny Eicher, decides he cannot let this mystery go.
Eicher travels to Yekaterinburg to dig into the archives himself. And what he finds is a city and a culture that is deeply, fundamentally shaped by historical cover-ups.
He learns about the Ipatiev House, which was located right in the city center.
This was the infamous site where Tsar Nicholas and the entire Romanov family were brutally executed in 1918 by Bolshevik revolutionaries, their bodies hastily hidden in a swamp and denied by the state for decades.
It establishes this powerful historical precedent in the region. The people living there know exactly what it looks and feels like when the government violently buries a tragedy.
So when 9 beloved students turn up dead with shattered ribs and radiation, and the lead investigator abruptly blames an unknown compelling force before sealing the files in a secret archive,
The local population is culturally primed to believe there's a massive, sinister cover-up.
Eicher meets with Yuri Kuntsevich, the head of the Dyatlov Foundation. The foundation operates out of a small, cramped basement apartment in the city.
It is filled, floor to ceiling, with broken bamboo ski poles, rusted old cameras, fading photographs, and towering stacks of death files.
It is a literal museum of grief.
And Kuntsevich acts as the fierce gatekeeper of this trauma.
What is striking during Eicher's visit is the lingering Cold War paranoia. At one point during the trip, Kuntsevich genuinely believes the FSB, the modern successor to the KGB, deliberately crashed Eicher's hired car on an icy road to warn the American off the investigation.
The culture of secrecy just breeds endless, exhausting paranoia. It outlives the Soviet Union itself.
But alongside that paranoia, you see this incredible, desperate desire for truth that crosses all language and cultural barriers.
There's this amazing scene in the book where Eicher meets a Russian researcher named Vladimir Borzenkov at the Moscow airport.
Oh, that scene is so memorable.
Right. Borzenkov is this intense guy wearing a skeleton key around his neck, carrying a high-security briefcase. They sit at a cafe table, and neither man can speak a word of the other's language.
But Borzenkov just starts frantically unpacking declassified documents, desperately trying to use crude translation software on a laptop to share the data.
Eicher, wanting to show gratitude, offers him an American energy bar.
Borzenkov cautiously inspects it like it might be poison before carefully tucking it into his briefcase.
It is a beautiful mechanical analogy for two guys, oceans and cultures apart, just desperately trying to share the truth.
It perfectly illustrates how trauma is inherited, preserved, and guarded by a community. And Eicher witnesses the raw emotion of this firsthand when he meets Tatiana, Igor Dyatlov's younger sister.
She was just 12 years old when her older brother died on that mountain.
Tatiana's interview is absolutely heartbreaking.
She vividly recalls the open casket funerals, which the authorities originally tried to ban.
She remembers looking at her 23-year-old brother. His hair, which had been dark brown, had turned completely white.
His skin was incredibly dark, a deep, reddish-brown, which she insists could not just be a result of the freezing wind and sun exposure.
The damage was so severe that the family only recognized him by the distinct gap in his front teeth.
The physical transformation of the bodies fueled so many of the radiation and chemical weapon theories.
But the emotional toll is what really lingers. Tatiana shares that their mother had actually begged Igor on her knees not to go on this specific trip.
She had a terrible premonition.
For the next 40 years, until her death in 1994, their mother lived with the agonizing daily belief that his death was her fault, that she should have physically blocked the door to stop him from leaving.
That is the long, devastating tale of tragedy.
Eicher also finally gets to meet Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor.
Yudin is an older man now, staying in Kuntsevich's basement museum, surrounded by the artifacts of his dead friends.
We learn about Yudin's deeply traumatic background, growing up in severe poverty and starvation during World War II, tasting sugar for the very first time at age 7.
He devoted his entire adult life to seeking the truth about what happened to his friends. His quiet presence in that basement, a man who lived a full life because of a backache, it's profound.
And in that same basement, surrounded by the case files and the grief, Kuntsevich does something remarkable. He pulls out a vintage, wind-up phonograph.
He carefully sets a scratched vinyl record on it, and he plays the exact same folk tunes that the hikers listened to in their tent 50 years prior.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? When I read that scene with the phonograph, the analogy that hit me was that it's like listening to a ghost's playlist.
That's a really haunting way to think about it.
We spend so much time in this story looking at the macabre, looking at the black and white crime scene photos, analyzing the frozen bodies, debating the trajectory of the slashed canvas.
But hearing that music bridges the gap of time.
It forces you to remember the vibrant, singing kids on the bus, crammed on each other's shoulders, projecting nothing but light, looking out at a bright future.
It completely strips away the true crime spectacle. It restores their humanity.
As we pull back from the declassified documents, the radiation tests, the damaged cars, and the aging survivors, we have to look at what this entire story leaves us with.
Distilling everything we've unpacked today, we have a portrait of a group of brilliant, progressive, joyful young people. They were engineers, scientists, veterans.
They represented the absolute best of a thawing nation.
Their tragic end spawned a mystery that consumed brilliant investigators, generated a massive cottage industry of wild theories, and drew an American across the globe 50 years later to stand in the freezing snow and ask why.
When Lev Ivanov closed the case file by blaming an unknown compelling force that pushed the hikers to their deaths, he meant it as an environmental or physical phenomenon, something he couldn't measure or prove.
Right, like an avalanche or wind.
But I want you, the listener, to take this thought with you. Perhaps that unknown compelling force isn't a weapon or a windstorm.
What do you mean?
Perhaps it is actually the human drive itself. It's the force that compelled 9 kids to seek freedom in an unyielding, incredibly dangerous winter wasteland when they could have stayed in a warm dorm.
The force that kept a grieving mother blaming herself for 40 years.
The force that kept Yuri Yudin relentlessly searching for answers until his dying day.
And it is the force that compels you to keep digging into a freezing Russian night half a century later, desperate to make sense of the dark.
The innate need to know, the need to explore despite the dangers?
Exactly. So the next time you step outside and feel the bitter wind cut through your jacket, I want you to remember the 9 voices singing on the bus to Vizhai, heading fearlessly into the snow.